In this chapter of Mona Baker's book, discuss language and translation with a brief view at how specific texts make sense to the readers. So we will look beyond the textual level to link sentences and paragraphs together and identify various textual features. So here we will pay attention to how utterances are used in communicative situations and how we interpret them in context. So to begin with, we have to know the pragmatics is. So according to Becker in 1992, in the page of 217, pragmatics is the study of language in use, and then pragmatics is how utterances are used in communicative situations and the way we interpret them in context. And then pragmatics is the study of meaning, not as generated by the linguistic system, but as conveyed and manipulated by participants in a communicative situation. And then, in Mona Baker's book, she put two important concepts in pragmatics. First is coherence and implicature. So before we know about the coherence, we have to know the cohesion first. And here, wait. Is my screen is visible, everyone?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Cohesion here is the surface expression of coherence relations, that it is a device for making conceptual relations explicit. So, for example, here, like conjunction, such as like therefore word, it may express a conceptual like from a reason or consequence. However, if the reader cannot perceive an underlying the meaning of the reason or consequence between the propositions connected by therefore word, so they will not be able to make sense of the text in question. And yeah, in other words, the text like will not be coherence for the reader. So generally speaking, the mere presence of cohesive markers cannot create a coherent text. Cohesive, cohesive markers have to reflect conceptual relations which make sense. Engfis in 1978b in the page of 110 and until 111 gives an example of a highly cohesive text which is nevertheless incoherent. So here, I bought a Ford, the car in which President Wilson wrote down the Champs Elysees was black. Black English has been widely discussed. The discussions between the presidents ended last week. A week has 7 days. Every day I feed my cat. Cats have 4 legs. The cat is on the mat. Mat has 3 letters. So the possibility of similar of cohesion, which is not supported by semantic relations or the meaning, is sometimes exploited in a few restricted genres. For example, in comedy. So the fact that we cannot normally make sense of stretches of language like the one quoted here. So in spite of the presence of a number of cohesive markers, it suggests that what actually gives texture to a stretch of language is our ability to recognize the meaning. And the next is coherence. So while cohesion concerns the surface relations that organize and create a text, coherence is the network of conceptual relations which underlie the surface text as perceived by the language users. The mere presence of cohesive markers such as linkers or lexical chains is not sufficient to create a coherent text. As I said, imagine we say here, I'm terribly tired because bananas are yellow, or I'm very tired at the end of the week. On Wednesday, I usually see my sister. So, conjunctions such as because in the first example here, in the first clause, in the A clause, it suggests a cause or effect relationship between the two here, the two clauses or the part of this sentence. In fact, it would be very difficult to find a logical reason why B here should cause the A clause. Or here in the second example here, and although week and Wednesday belong to the same lexical chain, it's hard to find a connection between the C and the D clause. So, is coherence a feature of text or situation? Coherence is mostly receiver-centered. It depends on the ability of the hearer or reader to interpret a stretch of language on the basis of his or her expectations and experience of the word, which in their turn are influenced by the society he or she lives in. For example, here, he looked like Frodo coming down the mountain. The hobbit was walking slowly and singing to himself. In here, the translator has to know that Frodo here and the Hobbit are the same person, which means that they must have, or the translator must have read the novel about Lord of the Rings, or at least the movie, or at least they heard about one of the two. So, if a translation of the sentence were addressed to a public who is not likely to have done any of the above mentioned things, so the translator would probably have to intervene and modify it, for instance, in the following way, like his. He looked like Frodo the Hobbit coming down the mountain. He was walking slowly and singing to himself. So, coherence here is not really a property of text, but of the event or situation on and of the people and things involved in it. So, in here, as stated by Carroll's in 1983, page 95, no text is inherently coherent or incoherent. In the end, it all depends on the receiver and on his ability to interpret the indications presented in the discourse so that finally he manages to understand it in a way which seems coherent to him, in a way which corresponds with his ideas of what it is that makes a series of actions into an integrated whole. So, a reader can only make sense of a text by analyzing the linguistic elements which constitute it against the backdrop of his or her own knowledge and experience. It therefore seems reasonable to suggest that, regardless of whether meaning is a property of text or situation, coherence is not a feature of text as such, but of the judgment made by a reader on a text. As stated by Snell Hornby in the Mona Baker's book in 1988, page 42, as far as translation is concerned, this means that the range and type of difficulties encountered will not so much depend on the source text itself as on the significance of the translated text for its readers as members of a certain culture or of a subgroup within that culture, with the constellation of knowledge, judgment, and perception they have developed from it. So, even when addressing members of their own linguistic community, like writers, will word their messages differently depending on the nature of the audience they have in mind, whether it consists of adults or children, and so on. Like any writer, a translator has to take account of the range of knowledge available to his or her, or and of the expectation they are likely to have about such thing as like organization of the world, organization of language in general. Here it is will be presented by the next presenter. So uh, that's all from my first section. So the next section will be presented by Hazel. So Hazel, time's yours.
Thanks.
Thank
So
you.
now, uh, for the Francisco, she has presented about the part of the coherence. So now, right now, in my turn, I'm gonna keep presenting about the part of the coherent and process of the interpretation. So we can also call it like an implicator. So before we start it, we have to focus on the one part that is here. So sometimes, like the Francisco has explained in the previous part, the coherence is also like it mostly depend on the reader sides, how the readers can be interpreted. So in here, Charles is that suggested before that a reader may see a certain continuity or sense between a part of an utterance and still fail to understand it fully. So how can they be able to fail to understand it fully? For those kind of part, they try to explain it by using the two type of the coherence. The first one is the supplemental coherence, and the second is the explanatory coherence. So in the next slide, I explain them with the by using some example. So let's go to the next slide. The very first one, supplemental coherent, is that we can see that for the sentence, I went to the cinema, the beer was good. So to be honest, for in between those two sentences is if they are coming up from the different sides, like to kind of like from the totally different way, they can't be related at all. But since they become together, so for the listener, for the hearer, it will be able to reach the interpretation kind of like the speaker said he or she went to the cinema and then he or she drank the beer at the cinema and then so the beer in that place is really great. So in that way, we need to interpret it. However, so is there any authorized that can we find the sentence kind of like the speaker drank the beer at the cinema? No, there is no that kind of authorized at all. However, from the side of the from the side of the listener, we can interpret in this way. So that is we call it supplementary coherence. We need to supplement for this part. So how about the second coherence? Next slide, please. For the next one is the explanatory coherence. For this one also, I just use the same phrase. So for the explanatory is that in actually for this time is not only establish the continuity of the sense just like the previous one, this time is they also justify it. So how can we justify? By giving the right context and then also we also need a knowledge of the subject and participant from the side of the listener. So the previous one, uh, I went to the cinema, the beer was good. For that one, if that is the explanatory coherent, the listener will interpret like the speaker said like he or she went to the cinema first and that the film is really bad. However, the good thing he can find to say about is that the beer he or she drank there was good. So how can we get this explanatory? Of course, like I said, we need a necessary knowledge. So what is the necessary knowledge in here mean? So maybe the knowledge about the film at the cinema is that good or bad, and then also can we drink beer at that cinema or not? Those kind of knowledge is also needed to be able to reach this kind of interpretation. But so to be more clearer, we will look at the differences between the those two coherence in the next slides. So in here, we can see that for the supplementary one is that it's lead to the explication of the thematic community. And at the time, however, for the explanatory coherent is just define this. And then also for the supplemental coherent, they indicate the element is repeated from the one segment to the another, but in the explanatory is that it leads to the manifestation of the reason why the certain thing is said the supplementally about an element. So that is the two main difference between these two coherents. So now, okay, yes. So now we're gonna go to the implication. For the implication is that we can say that that one is the one of the most important notion, and then also it have emerged in tech study in the recent year. It's like it's referred to the speaker mean or imply rather than what or he or she that literally says, not to be confused with the non-literal meaning, like for example idiomatic meaning. So let's look at the example. Harold said Sally should bring her umbrella. Literally meaning is just only focusing on the bring umbrella. However, from the point of the implication is completed, Harold's belief that it is likely to be rain. So for the points, we can see that we are just trying to find out what is the real point of the speaker set. What is it also can be kind of like the parents is saying to the children like you need to study. It means like instead of saying kind of like a studying, maybe at the time the children is kind of like playing game or maybe just trying to stay around or like a bush around to be able to study. So at that time may not be like from the parents' points, they might not only focus on that they really want them to study. It also might be kind of like stop playing. It's really noisy. You should just kind of like you should still calm. So in that way, they are just trying to use the other like kind of like study the S&P skills. For this one is we call it implicator. So sometimes we really confuse them with the idiomatic meaning. Why? Because idiomatic meaning is also is like a contain the figurative meaning is totally different from the phrase literal meaning. And then also it contains the expression denoting the interaction that is natural to the native speaker and then depend on the good mastery of the linguistic system in question rather than on the successful interpretation of a particular speaker intended or implied meaning of the given context. That is a reason why they confuse between idiomatic meaning and then also the implicator. Since both of them are not convey the literal meaning of the phrase. So we can see that in the next space. Yes. So on the left side, we can see that the speaker A has said, shall we go for a walk? At the time, the speaker B said, can I take a rain check on it? So in here, actually like, if that is a literal meaning, if we're gonna take the literal meaning, that could be the correct one. But if we wanna interpret it in the idiomatic meaning, it's totally confused because like take a rain check means decline to accept the offer or invitation immediately, but indicate the willingness to accept it at a later date. So we can see that the literal meaning and then also the idiomatic meaning is totally different. So there is no conversational implication involving at all. But from the right side, we can see that, shall we go for a walk? For that one is that it's raining out. Sorry, previous, yes. So in here, for the phrase it is raining, it could be many different meaning. It could be no, or at the same time, it could be yes. Like no, it's we better not because it's raining. So it's also could be the denying for the phrase of shall we go for a walk. But at the same time, we can just also say kind of like okay, but we better take an umbrella. For this one is like kind of so it's not 100%ly want to go there, but still fine. But at the same time, it also could means like yes, we will like working in the rain, so like kind of like 100%ly accepting this the phrase of the speaker A, shall we go for a walk? So we can say that. And actually, it just only mean like it's raining is that mere comment on the weather to the question. However, still we can convey in a different meaning. So from the left side is for that we call it idiomatic meaning, but on the right side is we call it implication. So That's only the point that they are not conveying the literal meaning. However, we can still see the difference between both of them. Okay, so now let's go to the next slide. So here we can see that for these oh yes, okay. So for this one is that we can see that this implication is that saying the point is that it has been set by the Christ. So in here we can see that we suggest that a speaker can signal and imply meaning conventionally or non-conventionally by using the textual resources which are the conventionally understood to signal certain relationships between the proposition. So for example, like the conjunctions such as therefore, because, and in spite of. So for example, we can also say like it is a box that a baby wants. So just by the conjunction that we can see that the baby want this one, baby want this box, like the baby wants something. For those kind of implication meaning also we can combine it, we can convey it. So that is also the power of the proposition. So we can also use the proposition to be able to see that. So now for the, yes, next slide, please. To say for this point is that Grace view is that we have like I have seen that so many researchers, so many scholars, it has been referred to the Grace views a lot. But for the Mona Baker, the writer of the In Other Words, from his point of view, he just like saying like it is really important application and translation. He conveyed it, however, is not primarily concerned with the written text. So I think you will also see in the previous slides that I mentioned the different example, but that those examples are only like focusing on the spoken exchange, like kind of like question and answer sequence. They really restricted to the small subset of these. So that's why sometimes this view is really difficult to be able to relate in the written communication. That is the part we have to focus and then also able to convey for this one. Okay, so that is the notes that Mona Baker request, like suggest to be able to note down for the Grace view. So now we're gonna go to the cooperative principle. When we said about the cooperative principle, we have to focus on the 4 different maxims. So what are the maxims with that? So the very first maxim is the maxims of the quantity. So that one is that it always make a contribution as informative as it require. For example, like the correct purpose of the exchange, and then also don't forget that please don't make the contribution more informative than is required. So you can see that the capital of India is New Delhi. So the speaker is already saying like he's telling the truth like from the best of the knowledge. There is no more information at all, just only the information, the only main point. The capital of India is New Delhi. That is, we call it maximum of quantity. So let's go to the maximum of quality now. For the second one is that quality. For this one is that try to make contribution one that is true. So like in here is that we don't say that what the speaker believes is false, and then also we also don't say that there is a like you lack the adequate evidence. For example, like do you know if Katie got an okay with her exam? So at the time the speaker will say yes I do, she did really well and got an A. So in here, speaker B just could say kind of like, yes, I do. But still, they still share the information that he know. So in that way, because like if they're gonna say only yes I do, it's gonna be like the informative one, the previous one maxims of the quantity, because there will be no more information than required, right? But in here they try to give more, so in that way it's gonna be not float the maximum of the quantity. So the another one is that number 3 is maxims of relevant. For the maxims of relevant is that we can say that it makes the contribution relevant to the current exchange, just like the word relevant. So in here, speaker A said, do you think Leo is dating someone new? So the speaker B replied, well, he goes to Bermuda most weekends. So in here is that Okay, so Leo is dating someone, and then also he is going to the burden. So the speaker B is like just only randomly telling about the Leo trips to the burden, right? So it could be there should be the relevant kind of like maybe Leo is dating, right? So that one that Leo is dating might be from the burden. So we can find that relevance. So that is about that. And then also for number 4 is the maxims of manner. For the maxims of manner is that you need to perspicuous and like kind of like avoiding the obscurity of expression, and then also we need to avoid the ambiguity. We need to be brief at the same time, and then it need to be orderly. So we can see that in the example here. I'm writing an essay on metonymy. It is a type of figure or speech. So in here, if we're gonna see only the first part, the listener might not be understand what is metonymy. That's why the speaker need to say, keep and explain what is the metonymy at the back. It is a type of figure or speech. That is, we call it maxim of manner. So kind of like focusing how would be the point of the from the point of the listener. We need to keep thinking about it. So for this one is the missing of manner. Okay, so in here, yes. For if we're gonna tell about the grace maxing, we also need to take care about sometimes it could be the violating and then also the floating. So how? So it could be the violated, and then if they are violated, it's gonna be broke like secretly, and then also the covertly. So we can also see in here, most common maxim violated is that maxims of quality and maxims of quantity. How? It could be like kind of like one an individual secretly withhold information that somebody else want to know. And another one is that is violated when an individual purposely tell a lie. Since they are like for the quantity is we need to give the information that is only needed. So if sometimes it could be like secretly hold the information at the time it becomes violating, and then also for the quality is also just like that. We need to give the information that we have known to like kind of like that is totally true. Sometimes we could tell lie at the time it become violating the maxims of quality. So now we're gonna go to the floatings of the maxims. Yes, okay. So floating the grace maxim is that we can see that we need to like kind of like ionic and then also metaphor, and then also sometimes we mishear somebody, and then the tone of the voice is like not much of the context at the time. It could be the floating the grace maxim. So for example, in the quantity, if somebody doesn't answer a question in the full, if somebody is didn't give the enough information that it become the floating. And then also for quality is also if sometimes somebody is really ionic, the speaker in here they want to be speaker is ionic, then there will be no maxims of quality. And then also sometimes relevant is like somebody is pretend to mishear. So in that way, they can change the conversation. So it could be there will be no more relevant at all. That's why at the time manner maxims of the relevant become flawed. And then also the maxims of manner. How? If the speaker use many big words and then also the technical jargon that they knew that their listener won't understand. So the main point of the maxims of manner is that try to look at from the point of the listener and then like try to convey the important part to be able to understand from the point of the listener. But if the speaker gonna use a really big word in the technical jargon, at the time it will be the thought at all. So then we're gonna go to the next slide, please. So we can determine the fact that violating and then also the floating, which one is more serious. Violating is more serious, of course, because the floating is like more common than the violating. Like so in that way it become like kind of like more acceptable. For example, like we don't want to keep talking about it. That's why we are trying to behave like we mishear it and then trying to change the conversation. And then like we try to use the big word. For those things, it's like usually is happening common as a common in the daily conversation. That's why floating the maxims first maxim is that accepted as a common thing. However, violating is not like that. So telling a lie in a court is arguably worse than telling a little white lie, kind of like that. So now we're gonna go to the next slide. In the next slide is that they explains about the standard. Yes. So for the words, do you know what time is it? So for this one is that it could be the two different meaning. For example, the first one is I don't know the time. I wish to know the time. At the same time, for another one is like you're very late. So in here we can see that for the plan of the Levinson, he's called this one is a standard implicator. But from the Grace point of view, he think like is a conventional implicator. So what is the difference between them? So we're gonna focus on the conversational implicator. In that way, you can see the points. So let's go to the next slide. So here is the conversational implicator. So it's often intimidated and then also is an utterance may be open or the several possible interpretation may or may not be there intentional on the part of the speaker. And then at the same time, it is complicated as the text of the translator. And then also another one, may knowingly or unknowingly eliminate certain possible interpretation of the original form of the target text and it may even interpret give rise of the other interpretation. Why is due to the structure of the target language and the nature of the target audience and the convention of the target culture. So from the translator point of view, if we have to translate it, we have to take care with these conversational implication. Why? Because it could be concerning with the nature of the target audience and then also at the same time the culture also. Sometimes like in the previous one said like for the coherent it is based on this listener point of view. And then also the speaker also like speaker might convey this one, but since it has many different meaning, if they change it, like if we try to just only pick up one meaning, what if that is not? Then the real meaning will be totally different. So when we have to convey from for those kind of implication, we need to focus a lot from the point of like listener point of view, speaker point of view, and then also cultural point of view, and then target audience view, target language view from the different points. So then yes, let's go to the next slides. For this one is that's why Grace detailed the number of factors it can contribute to the success of failure in working out the implicator. So the first one is that conventional meaning of the word and structure use. We need to take care about that, like the mastery of the language system. So we need to that is the factor that is really important to be able to decide what is that the succeed or the fail. And then also the second one is the cooperative principle and its maxims. And then another one is context, linguistic, and like the authoress. Another one is the other item of the background knowledge. And then also the last one is the fact that all relevant items falling under the previous heading are available to the both participants and though both like speaker, listener, translator, reader know and assume they could be this to be the case. So yes, so that's gonna be the all about my part. So this time, Safara's will keep going to the last part. So Safara, now it's yours. Hello, Safara, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me? Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Siri, would you please? Yeah, can you sit? Hello.
Yes, we can
Yeah.
hear yourself. Yes.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yes.
Thank you so much, sir. So this is my part, and in my present, in my part, I will be discussing about the coherence, implication, and translation strategies. Basically, our paper is designed about the simple strategies that we take from the translation, that we learn from the translation, and behind this, there's the you will see now the coherence in the text, and also the concept of the implication. So with this, I am starting with a sentence that's let's move beyond the textual level of connecting sentences and paragraphs, because when we talk about the coherence, it also gives us the kind of connectivity between the sentences and paragraphs, and the implicator is also one of the most important notions that plays its main role. And translation strategies are somehow the strategies that gives us an idea how to relate the text, both texts, source language text and target language text. For just before moving to the main sections of the my part, I wanted to repeat and make sure that the pragmatics can be defined as the study of language in use, the study of the meaning, or not as it is generated by the linguistic system. And in other words, it is conveyed and then manipulated by the participants in communicative situation. So as I earlier discussed that the chapter is focused on the three important sections, but over here at present the two main ways of making the sense of communication. One is coherence and the second is implication. So just wanted to make sure that there's the huge distinction and there's the huge difference between both of the terms, coherence and cohesion, because we often get confused about the terms, that what is different between both of these terms. Is already Francisca mentioned about the coherence, but to make it clear that coherence is all about the conceptual relations and that underlie the surface of the text. On the other hand, a network of the surface relations that that links the words and the expression is known as a cohesion. And coherence is all about the phase of response evolution of the text. On the other hand, in cohesion we are giving the property of the text, and in coherence the subjective judgments may vary from one person to the next person, while on the other hand in cohesion the objective capability of automatic recognition is generated. So these are the major differences between both of the terms, and it is the one of the most important matter that when these both of the terms play comes to engage in the text, so both have different roles in the text, whether in the translation strategies or in terms of implicature or in uh, other sources of text. Hello.
Yes, carry on, Savras.
Let me reshare it. Yeah. Can you see it now? So I was thinking that I was telling you about the both of the terms, but the detailed description about those terms, that when cohesive markers are present in the text, but the ability to recognize the underlying semantic markers that establish the continuity of the sense, that near the presence of the cohesive markers, so it doesn't guarantee the coherent in text, because sometimes we see that there are most of the elements the cohesive elements play their role in the text, but we do understand that this is the this all signal, all of those markers signals the coherence, but behind the scene that it does not indicate. and on the other hand, no text is inherently coherent or incoherent unless and until it all depends on the receivers and their ability to interpret and the indicators present in the text. Moving to the further scene, it is in the first part of the article, there was the concept about the conventional meaning of the words and the structures and the identity of the different type of references. So with this, I have made this how receivers expectations and experiences are from the world. So different people have the different views of ways and a way of events, and the situations are recognized and related to each other. It does indicate that identity of any reference maybe sometimes involves or maybe sometimes not involved, may not sometimes involve. So it is the matter of agreeing or it's not matter of agreeing or disagreeing, but of different ways of making sense. Number of people have number of different perspectives according to the intellectual thinking. This is the references, and yes, and there are a number of implications for the translator. For translator, he or she has to take in account for the range of knowledge available among the target language audiences, and the expectations. Some of the most important expectations they may have are given in the text. One is for the organization of the word, and second is organization of the language in general, and third is convention of the text types, and fourth is the structure of the social relations, and fifth is appropriateness of the certain linguistic and non-linguistic behavior. So these are some of the most important expectations that they keep to their translators, because target language audience, these are just minor expectations. Target language audience think they have a huge expectations on the translator that he will not draw their attention here and there, because it is the matter of these. It is one of the most important sensitive matter. When just a single concept changes overall, the concept of text goes here and there. So to make sure that when there is the concept of translation, it is with the it is with the expectation that the translator must meet the target language audience expectations, and coherence is indeed is a result of the interaction between knowledge presented in the text and the receiver's own knowledge and experience. This is how this term overlaps, and it is one of the most important notion in the text that brings the unity and order in the text. So this is what how it's important is, and it is also later influenced by a range of factors. The factors may vary according to the situation or the nature of the text. Yes, then come to the implicator. Uh, Implicator is all about the is already Francisca just gave and Sim gave the concept about the implicator. That it is one of the most important notion, as it recently has evolved and brought kind of evolution. But when it comes to the text, number of people gets confused about it because maybe there are various factors that students or the researchers or even scholars get confused because of recent emerging notion. But a reader could recognize the continuity of the sense between the parts of an utterance, but can't understand it fully because as earlier it was mentioned in the initial section of the presentation that it needs to be focused. And second, it comes to the in other words, when we talk about the supplementary coherence, it can indicate or we can get its concept just in the minimal coherence. We consider it as a minimal coherence, and the explanatory coherence is all about not only establishing the continuity of the sense but also justifies it. So this is how the explanatory coherence important is. Along with giving the quantity of senses in the text, it also gives the concept of justification that what are the root causes behind the factors. And there's the question that might raise in our mind that how do we understand more than actually said. So it's in concept of implicature, it can be understood as the with the help of aspects that comes in the meaning or both the literal and conventional meaning of an utterance. So this is just a technical hint that a number of editors can apply in understanding concept that what is actually said. And the last sections of the paper, there was the concept about the cooperative principles, as already as in give the detailed description, like she defined and gave the detailed descriptions about all of the four principles. But to make sure that what participants or the audience students expect or observe from the lessons, I wanted to just give you concept. While I was moving to the article, I observed that a number of examples were given in different manners in the text, and there were also some of the most important quotations related to the maximum of quantity, quality, relevance, and manner. But when it comes to the matter of violation, we see that majority of the people do not focus on these all four or five major principles. So with this second part, and in implicature we are giving the standard and the conversational. So in the standard implicature, it is also already defined by both Hazel and Francisca, but to give you a type of sense that it standard implicature does differ from the conversational implicature in the sense that standard implicature can signal the implied meaning conversationally by using the textual resources that conventionally signals the relationship between both presuppositions. On the other hand, conversational implicature is something that floating the mechanisms, and it is all relation. It is the direct and indirect or direct relationship with the mechanisms, because it all works on the cooperative principles in order to communicate certain type of messages or to give the detailed description about the different and Yes, already mentioned that applications for translator are there are so many, but among them an utterance may be open to the several interpretation is the in the final section of the presentation, there was the concept about the translation strategies, and the article. I think the soul of article is the translation strategies, because the writers wanted to focus and give the technical concept about the translation strategies in the end, because in the first sections I noticed that a different type of concepts are given as manner or introductory sections. We are doing different type of words, and the writers focus on grammatical aspect, or we may say that they went through a type of sense through I mean that indicates the grammatical overall grammatical sense. So by moving with steps, in the end, they tell us and about the strategies that we can improve and we can gain while reading. So with this, some of the most important strategies were given in the text, but to tell you that the ultimate purpose of strategies was to know the conventional meaning of words and their structures. This is also one of the most important, we can say that strategies. When we translate, we don't go through the different type of word meanings as structures. We even don't know whether those all of the words are the different meaning or structures belong to the typographical features or semantic process. So this is how the strategy is born. And second, I thought that I noticed that it was all about recognizing the identity and part of reference text. This is just not as substitution alone itself, but it indicates the cultural substitution, because when we recognize the text from where it comes, from what culture does it belong to, we come to know the ground reality about the text, that what is the scene behind the text and what a writer actually wanted to convey. Because in one of the writer mentioned in the example in the same article that a person who was translating his book, a person who was the Egyptian, one of the most important famous poets from the Egypt. He had written a famous book about the about one of the concept in the poetry or in prose. And the same book, when he translated initially he wrote that book in his native language, Arabic. And initially he wrote his book, his same book in the English language. But he then translated the same book in the Arabic language. He saw that there was the huge differences in the pages and in the concepts. So this is what the culture substitution focused. When he wrote the book in the Arabic language, he saw that there was only uh, proper estimated 15 pages. But when he translated the same book from English to the Arabic, he saw that there was the figure of there the figure of pages increased and it became 29. So recognizing identity and supporting references in the text is one of the core strategies. We usually the translators ignore it. So it must be focused and it must be given kind of clear attention to know the ground reality about the text. Text.
Hello, Sarfaraz. Are you here? Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you listen?
Yep.
I'm so sorry, I had network problem. Let me share it to you. Yeah. So I was discussing about the considering corporate principles and mechanisms in the translation, how they are not necessarily are relevant in our cultures. Number of people even isn't mentioned that there is the violation of two main operating principles, quality and whenever people write violate about the tell the lie, so sometimes we translator or even when we translate in piece of writing or a piece of in literature, we don't focus on these principles is it is not compulsory to relevant to the cultures, but it is very necessary that all of those principles must be considered by translation. So consider the text, consider the context, linguistics of the utterance. Considering context, linguistic utterances is one of the most important strategies that translator need to focus. And lastly, there is the concept that we always see that translators usually does not relate their experiences are there is also the problem that they do not usually present their emotional feelings while translating their piece of any piece of work. So considering the context and linguistics feature is while focusing on the utterances is one of the most important. And lastly, the last section was last section of article was about it that not other items of the background knowledge, and it was all about indicating that it is not possible to know what knowledge the reader has. It is a special use of goodness. So, in conclusion, the main in order to maintain the coherence, translators often have to minimize the discrepancies between the model of the world presented in the source text, and I do consider that this is one of the most important points. That whenever translators does not minimize as in the first point the model of the world presented in the source text, then ultimately they go and does not put their real soul in the translated or the target language text. And the second point that was given that with which the target reader is likely to be familiar. Yes, and this is the one of the most important nature that they have to be familiar with the they must let the reader whom they target, he or she must be should be familiar about the matter. So a question about this that what is the translator's view of user role, and where does loyalty lie and with the source related and with the target language text. So this is what a number of questions along with this question are raising in our mind that what are the actual strategies. Earlier mentioned all of these strategies are considered, then there is not any kind of problem about the role or about the loyalty or about the source language text or the target language reader. So all of these have been found. And yes, thank you so much for this. And it was my part of presentation. And if you have any kind of question, you can ask.
Okay, so I think the three
And
presenters have completed the presentation.
yes, sir. That's all from our presentation.
Questions? Any questions for the presenters? I think someone is sharing her screen. Sadaf, do you want to ask something? Any questions? Go ahead, Sadaf, if you have any question.
Hello?
Yeah.
No, sir, I don't have any kind of question. Sorry.
Do you have any question? Oh, maybe not. Right, if there is no question, if there is no single question, I do have several questions, but let me start by giving a little bit of how I view this presentation. So this is just a general impression of the presentation completed by all the three presenters. I think I have mentioned in the chat that you exceeded 60-minute presentation time, but yeah, that's all right. Next time, I think we should respect the time limit. Okay, so do your presentation between 50 to 60 minutes, and then you need to simulate this before. If you exceed it, try to make the presentation more compact. And then if you present less than 50 minutes, try to elaborate some points you might have missed. And then from the proportion, I think the first speaker has very less proportion as compared to the second and the third speaker. Okay, and also the third speaker's material somehow overlap with other speakers, first and second. Would you care to elaborate this? Would you care to explain this? All presenters, and any of you.
Yeah. Sir, I personally went through overall article. While reading the article, I saw that many of the sections were overlapping and similar to the other sections. As first part, Francisca took the same concept was also present in my last part about the coherence. So I was just thinking that how we were just thinking that how should we make distinction between both of the sections, but the concept was somehow different because in first part two the writers were discussing about the coherence and implication, while in the last part two there was the concept about the coherence and implication, but the difference was among the examples. So because of this, somehow this the sense and the concept of material our lips and is somehow similar to the another.
Okay, Sarfaraz, I disagree with you because I think you did presented some materials that are overlapping with the first and second presenters, and I need you to answer my question honestly. Sarfaraz, did you create the material yourself?
Sir, about the presentation?
Yeah, the presentation material. Did you create the presentation material yourself?
Sir, about the presentation, I went through the overall article and about the points differently noted.
Sarfaraz, just yes or no, please. Did you create your presentation by yourself? Did you yourself
And
create the presentation material?
no, sir, it was given in basic slides.
Say again.
Yes, sir.
Yes or no?
Yes, sir, it was given on the basic slides.
Sorry, just yes or no?
No, sir.
No. Why?
Sir, because I saw that points were becoming similar as earlier the question that. So in the same matter, when I was writing, the material was becoming so similar, and I was thinking to give a detailed
Sorry,
description.
Sarfaraz, I have to cut it here because you don't seem to understand my question, where I lead to. So my question is, did you create the presentation material yourself? Your answer is no. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Sir, because I mentioned that wanted to make a distinction from the other presentation,
Say
and
again.
one the detailed description.
One more time.
Sir, sir, I was thinking that I should give the detailed description about the every corner, the part I was giving. So that's why I took it from the busy slides.
Okay, Sarfaraz, you don't seem to understand my question, so I will just need to expose this. So everyone, can you open your tab? So I sent you a link to a presentation online. This looks very identical to Sarfaraz materials. The PowerPoint, this is crazy, yeah, that Sarfaraz has just presented. Okay, Sarfaraz. My next question is, why did you do this? Why didn't you create your material yourself?
Sir, as I already mentioned that I took it because that I wanted to give the detailed description about the my part. Because when I was just writing the points I made, I thought that it was not making differences from other parts. And secondly, in this slide, there were the great points that I noticed that I can talk about on those points because when I was just writing about the points, so the little points were not giving the detailed description. And because of this, I took this and even I put in the slides that we already made.
Sarfaraz, those points are trivial. The points that you mentioned are trivial. Are you aware that this is considered a plagiarism?
Sir, I just thought to I just thought that I could have just presentation. I could not have information about this that it would be considered. I am so sorry, extremely sorry.
Okay, let me cut it you here. Let me cut here, Sarfaraz. Yeah, you can turn off your mic. Yes, there's a lot of seems to be a lot of noise in the background. So everyone else, including Sarvaras, yeah. So taking someone that's material and presented it as if it is yourself is a plagiarism. That's one clear example of plagiarism. And you didn't even mention the resource. Yeah. It's not a matter that you create your presentation using Prezi or not. Okay, so you didn't get my point set up. So if you take someone that's presentation, yeah, and present it as if it is your own without recognizing, yeah, without exposing the real author, that's plagiarism. And second one, this is not allowed. So I expected you to create your own presentation materials. And that's why you overlap with the other two speakers. I clearly mentioned the first time, yeah, that I really hate plagiarism. And this is one of the examples. So please don't do this, not only for Safras, but also for everyone else. If you hesitate whether what you're going to do is considered plagiarism or not, please contact me or other lecturers, not only for my class, but also for other classes that you're enrolled in.
Sir, can we not get reference is in the presentation? As a reference, can we not use that?
Okay, Sarfaraz, I could not hear you well. While you were presenting, there was so much background noise. Okay, so much background noise, I could not hear you well. So I just relied on your presentation slide, and I saw that it is very identical to the Prezi.com, the online presentation that I found. Okay, so I think I had enough clarification. You can use it as a reference, but not full presentation, and you have to admit it. Make it clear in the beginning. But again, that's not what I expected you to do. What I expected you to do is that you read the book, because that's the primary reference, and create a presentation on your own so that I can understand which part you understand and which part you don't. So even though your presentation is very bad, there's no presentation, there's no perfect presentation. Yeah, but I do appreciate honesty. Yeah. Okay, so no more debates. Yeah, I don't want to debate with you. So, but the point is that please don't do this anymore. Okay, avoid plagiarism at all cost. Is that clear for Sarfraz and everyone else?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
You
Thank you, sir.
Right, so I do have some questions. No, not questions yet, but I do have some more general impressions about the PowerPoint slides. So Francisca, in your presentation slides, you quoted the book at sentences and paragraph level. Well, this is an honesty, yeah, but it's quite difficult for the viewers to understand this, and you didn't highlight keywords. So I think it will be better for you, Francisca, and also maybe to Nan. So just make bullet points and then clarify. Use a lot of examples, because if I just want to hear you saying the same things as in the book, I can just read the book. That's it. Okay, so you use bullet points, use more examples, because when readers, sorry, not readers, so when viewers of your presentation see examples, the concept has been more operational. It's no longer on conceptual or abstract level. It's more operational.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, so Nan did, yeah, a little bit better. Yeah, but I think Nan, you dominated too much.
Yeah.
And there's actually a very important point, yeah, that you have already described, maybe 50%, but I expected you to do more because you did actually good in that 50% part. So that was in the, I could not recall on which slide, but I can refer to the book, which is about the maxims. So if you can bear with me, Nan.
Yeah.
Hang on, stay there. Right, so in the book, it's in the page 225. Yeah. So when you are describing cooperative principle, you did well on describing those 4 points. However, if you see the points, there are 2 sub points there. For instance, quantity, point A and point B. Okay, so you somehow merge the explanation of point A and point B, whereas I expected that you could describe them separately.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so there are several points, unless point 3 relevance, Yeah.
Yes.
So for instance, manner. Yeah, manner has 4 subpoints.
Yes.
So what is the difference between these 4 subpoints? They do have some things in common, but when you explain about them separately and perhaps give different examples, perhaps the viewers of the presentation can understand this better.
Yes, sir.
And actually, you did you did actually well, actually. So Sarfaraz, not Sarfaraz, sorry, Nan. So perhaps can we give some examples of those 4 subpoints? Avoid obscurity, avoid ambiguity, be brief, and be orderly. Because these are the foundations before we relate this to real examples of translation cases.
Yes, sir. So like from the base of my understanding, the very first point that avoid obscurity of expression is like we need to avoid the language to be like sometime the main like kind of like we call it like a source. The language source is like if we gonna translate it directly, it become really difficult to understand. So at the time, we need to avoid the language to be like difficult to understand. We need to try to look at from the point of that is my that's my understanding. From my understanding is like we need to avoid that is from the point of difficult to understanding. For example, kind of like wait, I can't think of the example
Maybe
right now.
just giving straightforward examples, and it's not necessarily, it doesn't have to be necessarily related to translation, because this is actually a general linguistic concept.
Yes. Instead of using a really big words, try to use the easy words, kind of like that. That is how, like, for example, like the monotony, like instead of using the word, like trying to use the easier one. And then also for the second one is avoid the ambiguity. So like, sometimes some of the word is we can interpret in many different ways, kind of like using the word like rulers. For the ruler is that it has a 2 different meanings, kind of like that. So instead of using the ruler, kind of like the person who is like maybe like a king or queen trying to use those kind of word, it can avoid the ambiguity. And then also for number 3 is that be brave. So like just only pick up the important point instead of explain everything like everything in detail. Just only pick up the main point and then trying to explain for the listener to be able to get the only the main source. So we need to avoid the unnecessary parts and then be orderly. So like sometimes we need to explain it in the information in order. In that way, if they are not in order, it won't be the make sense. For example, like kind of like how to make a cake, kind of like that. If we have to explain it, kind of like just like the based on the word we use like a preposition. In the previous one, maybe they used the word before. So if they use the word before, their order will be the opposite. So like when we translate, we need to kind of like making them into the order by using a different preposition like first, second, firstly, secondly, next, done, finally. By using that, we can make them into the order. In that way, it will be make easy for the maybe like from the viewer or listener or the readers to be able to process it. That is how I understand.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Nan. Okay, yeah, that was good. But unfortunately, I could not see the examples. So I was expecting that those points and the illustration were available in the presentation, but unfortunately, it was absent in the presentation. Yeah.
I will hear about that more in next presentation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And the last one is that my general impression is that the presentations are lacking. I would expect more and more examples again. So this is still the same criticism addressed to the previous group, that I am really happy to see more examples, but I didn't see a lot of examples proposed here. I did see some, but I expected more actually.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and then you need to highlight the keywords, because sometimes when you take examples from Mona Baker's, so the examples are in the form of text, but you need to highlight the keywords. So in the presentation, please do that. Highlight the keywords instead of just highlighting it using your mouse. Yeah, so that's the use of PowerPoints or Prezi or whatever multimedia software that you use to do the presentation. Use the highlighter to spotlight the difference, to spotlight things that you want to emphasize. And then, yeah, unfortunately, I don't think that we have much time here. It's just, let me check the time. Now it's 14:28, and we do have, I think, 12 minutes. So, yeah. What I want to do, yeah, now is that I want the three of you to revise the presentation.
Yes.
Let me share my screens so it's
Yes, sir. Okay.
so it's easier for you to understand. Hang on. I think I'm sharing my screen now. I have multiple screens, so apologize for that. Yeah, so you are in group 11. Okay, so Safaz, Nan, and Francisca. So upload your presentation here in meeting 11, but revise it first. Okay, and take into considerations my suggestions. Okay.
Yes, sir.
In this 10 or 12 minutes, just 10 minutes, I'm just going to highlight, I'm just going to tell you the page number of the examples, of interesting examples that I want you to incorporate in the presentation. So please stay with me while I give it open. So I've created a series of questions actually. So for instance, this one, I think Francisca presented it. So in one of your slides, beginning with cohesion is the surface, blah, 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 blah. Why the text is considered cohesive? I think that text, forgot the page number. I think it's 218. Yeah.
Okay.
It's 218. Yeah. Page 220 and 221, 229. Okay. 234, and it has a reference to a footnote presented in page 260. Yeah, 240, 241, 48, 49, 51, 251, 53. So forgive my misspelling. I type it in hurry as you are speaking. So yeah, these are some examples which I think would be very, very useful for the readers. Sorry, no readers, viewers of your presentation. Okay, so please try to incorporate some of these examples in your presentation file, and do incorporate these examples by highlighting the keywords. So remember, you are no longer presenting, so the viewers will rely heavily just on the slides. Okay, feel free to add voice to the presentation slide. Yeah, do you know how to add voice to your presentation slide?
I don't think so, sir.
Okay, so I will just show it to you really, really quickly because this is very useful.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, so here is a presentation file. So go to slideshow. Are we recording now?
Yeah,
So,
sir.
okay, good. Right, so click on record. Yeah. Then from current slide here, So what you have to do is you just need to press this button. Yeah. So this is, sorry, hang on, 3, 2, 1. So this is an example of how you incorporate your voice into the presentation slide.
Okay.
Click again. Yeah. And then I don't think you can hear my voice.
Yes.
Yeah. But I'll just do it one more time. I will reshare my screen so that you can hear the voice that I just recorded.
Okay.
Hang on. Where is it? Trying to find my MS Teams. Okay, got it. Now I'm going to reshare. With computer sound. Okay, now preview. So this is an example of how you incorporate your voice into the presentation slide. Did you hear my voice? Did I just record it?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. And then you can delete if you feel that's not really good. You can re-record your voice. That's it. But that's only a suggestion if you think that it's necessary for you to do that. Yeah. If you think that the viewers can really understand from your presentation slide, you don't have to do it. Okay. Only my suggestion. Okay. One more thing actually, but let me see if you have any question on the chat box. Yeah, I would really need to clarify this point to Pak Suwarno and Pak Mualimin. Yeah, but don't do that in my class. Okay, this is considered a plagiarism because I expected you to create your material by yourself. Right, so you still have another chance for another presentation. Yeah, so please don't do this anymore. One more thing. We are going to meet each other in the next class. Yeah. So one more thing that I want to discuss is about the schedule, because we need to reschedule, as next week the system requires us to meet to have a class, but unfortunately next week is the whole week will be a public holiday in Indonesia. Okay, so there are some options that I'd like to offer to you, but we are really over the time, and yeah, I think I'm just going to discuss this in our next class because I'm going to see you all again. And don't worry about the presence list. I have marked all of you in. Yeah, so you don't need to worry about the presence list anymore, because some people, they worry a lot about this. Right, so that's about today's session on this class. So I'll see you I think in 23 minutes or so
Oh, sorry,
for the
sir.
next class, in case you don't have any question.
Sorry.
None? Francisca, do go ahead.
Yes, I would like to know when would be the deadline we need to submit our revised PowerPoint.
Yeah, before next week.
Before next
week. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, sir.
In a week time.
But sorry, I wanted to ask something, please.
Yes.
Actually, I didn't revise mine yet. So do we still have time?
Please do so.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
Sir, is it individually or we unite in the one group?
Sorry,
Or-
say again.
We just submit in our individual section or all of the section?
As a group. So
okay.
I just need one person to submit it.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. I'll grill.
But please do indicate your parts. Okay,
Correct.
is that clear, Francisca?
Yes, sir. It's
Mm.
clear.
Great. Well, Hand, your mic is open. Do you have more question?
No. Thank you, Bob. Thank you so
okay.
much.
Okay, great. So I'll see you in the 22 minutes or so. Okay. You can leave the meeting and please come back later.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.